Chapter 1. The Man on the Embankment, the evening of March 14th, 1893, nestled itself quietly into fog-laden London, as though the city itself preferred secrecy. Beneath the amber glow of gas lamps I returned to Baker Street, after having tended to a case of troubling rheumatic fever in Camberwell. The damp air clung to my coat and hat, embedding faint scents of coal smoke and river mist refuges for the senses in this perpetual melancholy dot inside our flat at 221B. Holmes sat in near silhouette upon the divan, slender fingers interlocked beneath his chin like the hands of a practiced concert pianist awaiting the cue. A large tome lay open across his knees, though his eyes were closed. The stillness before the storm. "You return late, Watson," he observed without opening his eyes, voice soft yet edged with watchfulness. I removed my gloves with a sigh of relief, setting both them and my cap upon the hall stand. I remained in Camberwell until Mrs. Bradshaw's child stabilized. She'd both the anxious nerves and my attention. Holmes inhaled sharply, nostrils flaring slightly. "You walked home via the Thames embankment?" I paused in surprise. "I did." "How could? You bear the briny musk of river fog, tempered by coal smoke, most likely from the steamers, and that smear of reddish clay on your heel. Balmoral Division, Templeside. The embankment drains through those pipes," he explained. At last opening his lid, I could only nod in astonishment. Holmes closed a hand over mine. "No marvel, Watson. The mind once trained to surface detail becomes a lantern in a dark room." I offered a wry smile. "You make observations sound mundane." He spread his arms in mock humility. "Merely a tried method. But let us not dawdle." Holmes gestured toward an inactive hearth and a single newspaper laid out on the adjacent table. I retrieved it backward, then read aloud. "Mystery on Thames embankment. Unidentified gent found dead. At approximately 5 a.m. this morning, constables discovered the body of a well-dressed gentleman slumped against the parapet, near Cleopatra's Needle. His chest bore a silver dagger, evidently ceremonial in origin. No identification was found on the person. Scotland Yard is making an urgent appeal for assistance in the victim's identification and in uncovering motive." "That article certainly defies easy explanation," I said, folding the paper. "A ceremonial dagger. It appears more ritual than conventional murder." Holmes rose, towering over me. "Exactly, Watson. Ritual suggests motive beyond personal symbols, statements, perhaps even messages." My heartbeat quickened. "Like a form of expression and not just violence." He nodded. "We shall visit the scene. I shall reconstruct, if only for the impression. Watson, fetch your coat." Moments later we stepped out into the sighing Windar path, lit by halogen flames amid drifting wisps of mist. The embankment lay cloaked in stillness, except for the grumble of early steamers and the faint rush of the Thames. The constables were still present, their low lamps held aloof and respectful. We approached quietly, their relief palpable when they recognized Holmes. He spoke briefly to them, then knelt by a marker indicating where the body had rested. He touched the damp stone parapet. "See, Watson, here are faint scuffs of the man's shoes, suggesting he was standing before collapsing. The drag marks indicate that the dagger came first, then the victim fell." He recovered a small scrap of paper gently blown by the river breeze. "A receipt fragment for a single ticket. dated 2 days ago from Euston Express. He slipped it into his pocket. A constable murmured nearby, "Inspector Lestrade's heading this, sir, makes sense, considering the ceremonial weapon." Holmes nodded quietly. By 11. We returned to 221B. Holmes reclined again, eyes fixed on a brass mantel clock ticking in their strange papered shadows. I sat at the round table, my medical bag laid out. Beneath the lamp's light, Holmes sipped tea before casting his gaze toward me. "Watson," he began deliberately, "when you touched your heel to the somnolent river stone, the clay imprint was uneven, suggesting haste rather than leisure. We must determine his arrival, purpose, and pace." I leaned forward. "But ceremonial Dagger, who carries such a blade?" Holmes steepled his fingers. "That was my next question." At that moment a swift knock announced a visitor. Mrs. Hudson ushered a tall, grave-faced gentleman into the room. He carried the air of urgency rather than ceremony. "My apologies," he began. "Dr. Sherlock Holmes?" Holmes inclined. "Yes, sir." "I am Dr. Archibald Willoughby," he said, voice quivering yet resolute. "I received news this morning. The deceased on the embankment may well have been my brother, Percival Willoughby." He stood as though bracing for impact. I noted the fine cut of his coat and the slight tremor in his hand. Holmes gestured to a chair. "Please be seated, Dr. Willoughby. Tell us everything you can recall." Willoughby sank into the chair and clasped his hands. "Percival is a bookseller specializing in Oriental manuscripts. He left Kensington at dusk yesterday, bound for Lambeth. He mentioned a private meeting, but would not explain. I thought nothing of it at the time." Holmes arched an eyebrow. "And the dagger?" "The dagger belonged to our grandfather," Willoughby said. "A silver blade, inlaid with exotic designs from our grandfather's travel in Kurdistan. It was kept at family estate, but Percival insisted on carrying it to protect manuscripts he had acquired. He never removed it." Holmes nodded thoughtfully. "What was in these manuscripts that required such protection?" Willoughby straightened. He obtained a fragment of a Mesopotamian text, thought to rewrite parts of accepted scholarship, something profound enough to upset academic circles. Holmes fixed his gaze on Willoughby. "Did Percival express fear?" "Yes," the doctor swallowed. "He was anxious about the fragment falling into the wrong hands. He warned me unseriously, in the end, that some scholars would kill for it." Holmes leaned back, contemplative. An old family heirloom turned into a weapon in a strange twist. Willoughby exhaled sharply. "Do you believe his murder was related to the fragment?" Before I could respond, Holmes rose briskly. "Indeed. Watson, fetch my coat. We must visit Percival's study." We arrived at Willoughby's Kensington home by carriage. Holmes was alert, eyes flicking across each dust-speckled lamp until we reached Percival's study door, locked. Willoughby provided a key. Inside lay shelves of leather-bound volumes, pigeonholed fragments, and a single small box stowed in the corner. Papers lay scattered, notes mixed with receipts and common books. Holmes walked methodically among them, picking up a broken seal on the desk, a chipped shield with an unfamiliar crest. He handed it to me. "Security from his client," he murmured. "Or a signet, perhaps, from the man your brother met." On the table lay the fragment, a small, sealed scroll with cuneiform notation. I picked it up with gloved care. Holmes watched in silence. I turned it over. "A petition? Or perhaps prophecy?" I mused. Brows furrowed, Holmes tapped his cane against the hardwood floor. But the question is, how did an ancient text lead to a modern death? Holmes found among the scattered papers a note. Meeting with Darius Corwin confirmed 7 p.m. Lambeth Bridge. Bring fragment. Darius Corwin, Holmes mused. An antiquarian? Another name was here Ahmad al-Malik. Possibly Middle Eastern. That should narrow the suspects. I frowned. If only Percival made it to Lambeth Bridge. Holmes stepped to the window, gazing past us. He did, but someone shaved off the final steps. We'll reconstruct from Lambeth Bridge north to the embankment. He gathered fragment, seal, and dagger, still wrapped, in a leather SATCHEL dot. Double quotes, Dr. Willoughby. Your brother trusted you. His. Death must not be sealed as the end of discovery. Willoughby exhaled, voice cracked. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Holmes and I traversed Lambeth Bridge at midnight, sleeves rolled, cane tapping rhythmically against the pavement. The air was sharp with tension and the unspoken weight of ritual murder. He traced a line with his finger. He crossed here, past a water guard station. Up then to the embankment wall. He paused. His final act was protecting the fragment and the dagger, but the weapon was used against him. The silent question is, why public exposure? I shivered. A warning. Holmes nodded at length. Yes, a statement intending to ensure the fragment's secrecy, or the manuscript did not speak truth, or both. We returned toward Baker Street as fog swallowed us, the whispers of shifting gas lamps echoing all around. Returned to our familiar room, Holmes placed the fragment and seal under lamp. We have our suspects. We have motive. We need proof and... The hands. He poured brandy for Willoughby and me. Now, Watson, we begin tracing footsteps. Darius Corwin and this Ahmad al-Malik. Meanwhile, secure the fragment. Willoughby rose. I have confidence in you, both of you. Holmes smiled faintly. Conscience is your inheritance, Dr. Willoughby. We shall honor it. As Willoughby departed, Holmes closed the door. I handed Holmes the brandy. He looked at his reflection in the dark glass of the mantel clock. Watson, tonight we have a blade and a fragment. Tomorrow we shall turn them both on the illusion. I raised my glass. To the truth, he clinked his. To the truth, Watson. And to the dagger's next reveal. Chapter 2. Shadows. In the ledger the next morning, Baker Street was shrouded in a ghostly mist that curled around, horse-drawn hansoms and flickered along the gas-lit pavement. Inside 221B, Sherlock Holmes sat at the burled mahogany table, a ledger open before him, a half-empty cup of tea at his side, and Percival Willoughby's fragment secured nearby in chemise cloth. I prepared to step out on one of our first investigative leads. Holmes glanced. I opened my mouth to respond, but Holmes was already leaning forward as the carriage slowed to a halt. We had arrived at Scotland Yard. Inside. Inspector Lestrade met us with a sour look. Well, Mr. Holmes, I hope you haven't come to upend another case with one of your pet theories. We have the weapon, the motive, and the opportunity. Miss Lydia confesses she heard the scream and did not report it. Her relationship with the deceased was tense at best. And yet, Holmes murmured, your evidence is all of the sort that would satisfy a man in need of a quick resolution. May I see the dagger again? With some reluctance, Lestrade produced the weapon, a beautifully wrought, silver-hilted blade, stained dark at the tip. Holmes examined it beneath the gaslight, his eyes narrowing. "Tell me, was the residue tested for human blood?" Lestrade bristled. "Of course, the lab confirmed it." "Interesting," Holmes muttered, "and yet there is no trace of the oil one would expect if this blade had been kept in a case. It has the dull sheen of something long exposed." He passed it back and gestured toward the window. "Come, Watson. We have an errand before dusk." We walked the length of New Oxford Street and into a quieter corner of Bloomsbury. There stood the modest dwelling of Mr. Hubert Blaine, the solicitor and confidant of the late Miss Miriam Hargrave. Holmes knocked thrice. When Blaine answered, the lines around his mouth were deeper than before, and his eyes carried the red tinge of grief. "Or guilt, perhaps both, Mr. Holmes," he said stiffly. "Doctor, I assume you're not here for tea." Holmes inclined his head. "You are correct, sir. We require clarity on the nature of Miss Hargrave's estate." Blaine hesitated. "It's all in order. The majority is left to the cathedral. Restoration fund her lifelong cause. And the remainder? Dispersed among friends. A minor sum to her maid. A bequest to Miss Lydia Gray for her companionship. Was there no mention of the late Lord Fernham?" Blaine blinked. "None. She had no contact with him for over a decade." Holmes tilted his head slightly. "And yet he came to see her the very day of her death. Did you not think that odd?" "I was unaware of his visit." "Then perhaps you are unaware of something else," Holmes said quietly. "That the dagger which killed Miss Hargrave belonged not to her collection, but to the Fernham estate. It was displayed in their trophy room until 3 weeks ago." Blaine's face paled. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Holmes studied him. "Then you will not mind us searching your home." Blaine backed away. "On what authority?" "On?" "None," Holmes said cheerfully. "But if you refuse, I shall consider it a most unfortunate indication of guilt." Blaine's resolve faltered, but in the end he nodded. Inside, Holmes's movements were quick and deliberate. He opened desk drawers, rifled through filing cabinets, and finally settled on a locked trunk near the fireplace. He picked the lock with practiced ease. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with blue ribbon. He read one, then another, his brow arching higher with each page. At last he handed one to me. It read, "My dearest Miriam, I cannot abide this silence between us. You must understand that what we did, what we were, is not a thing I can erase. And yet, if it is your wish that we speak no more, I will respect it. But I beg you, return the dagger. It is not only a token, but a symbol of what passed between us. F. I looked up sharply. "Fernham?" Holmes nodded. "Their affair was not merely a youthful dalliance. It was deep and secretive. When it ended, it appears Miriam kept more than memories. The dagger was his. He wanted it back." Blaine's expression was one of devastation. "She never told me," he whispered. I thought we were close." Holmes's tone soft. "People rarely tell all, Mr. Blaine, especially when the heart is involved." As we returned to Baker Street, Holmes's energy seemed to rise rather than fall. "We have 2 men bound to the victim in complex ways," he said. "Blaine, whose affections were unrequited. Fernham, whose shame was never forgotten. Either might have had motive." "True," Holmes said, "but only one had the opportunity and a reason to mislead the police. Later that night, we returned to Hanley House. The great hall was quiet save for the rustle of Miss Lydia's skirts as she approached us. "You've discovered something," she said, eyes flickering to Holmes. "Yes," Holmes replied, "but not what you think. Tell me, Miss Gray, did you see anyone in the hallway the night of the murder?" She hesitated. "No, but I heard footsteps. Slow ones, like someone limping." "Thank you," Holmes said. "That confirms it." "Confirms what?" I asked. "That our murderer is none other than the man who mourned most publicly, Lord Fernham." We confronted Fernham the next morning at his club. Holmes wasted no time. "The dagger was yours," he said. "You wrote to Miriam begging its return. She refused. You came to retrieve it yourself." Fernham shook his head. "I never entered the house. I stood outside, but I turned away." Holmes gave him a long look. "Did you? The hall boys saw someone matching your description enter at dusk. You wore gloves. And the limp, the same leg you injured in a duel in '78. Fernham's face crumpled. "She wouldn't listen," he muttered. "Said I didn't deserve her forgiveness. But that dagger, it was a part of us. I couldn't bear to think of her keeping it in contempt. So you killed her?" He flinched. "I didn't mean to. She tried to scream. I only meant to frighten her." Holmes stood, expression grim. "Intent or not, a woman is dead. You shall answer for it." That evening, back at Baker Street, I set down my pen and looked at Holmes. "You knew it was him." "All along, I suspected," he said. "But without the letters, the motive would be speculation." "And Blaine?" "An unfortunate casualty of love, but not a killer." I stared into the fire. "It's strange. So much pain over a relic." Holmes nodded. "Strange indeed, Watson. But in matters of the heart, the deadliest weapons are rarely made of steel." Final chapter. The quiet of ashes. It was a subdued, rain-slicked afternoon in Baker Street. The fire crackling low in the hearth, and Holmes seated opposite me, his violin untouched at his side. The case of the Dagger of the Dead had closed 2 days earlier with the formal arrest of Lord Percival Fernham. Scotland Yard had moved swiftly once Holmes presented the correspondence, the dagger's provenance, and Lydia Gray's confirmation of the limping figure she had heard in the corridor that fateful night. Holmes remained, curiously reflective since our return, staring out the window at the blur of hansoms passing beneath the gas lamps. "You appear melancholic," I said finally, setting aside my notes. "Though I dare say you've every reason to be triumphant. The murderer was unmasked. Justice will be served, and Scotland Yard, however grudgingly, has acknowledged your role." He turned his pale gaze toward me. "Triumph, Watson, is a sentiment better reserved for games or elections. There is no triumph in unveiling tragedy, no victory in illuminating the flaws of the human heart." I fell silent, understanding his meaning. This had not been a case of greed or gain. It had been a matter of love twisted by time and pride. "Fernham was once a man of promise," Holmes continued, "a decorated officer, a skilled linguist, and a gentleman of some esteem. And yet, unable to reconcile his past with Miss Hargrave, he descended into obsession. The dagger, an object of symbolism and sentiment, became his justification for confrontation." "And murder," I added grimly. Holmes nodded. "Indeed. His intention may not have been to kill, but his rage, stoked by rejection and memory, proved fatal." He rose and crossed to the cabinet where he kept his tobacco. As he filled his pipe, he gestured toward a sealed envelope upon the table. I picked it up and recognized the crest of Hargrave and Blaine, the late Miss Hargrave's law office. From Mr. Blaine? Yes, he sent word this morning. I broke the seal and unfolded the brief note. Dear Mr. Holmes, in accordance with the revised will of Miss Miriam Hargrave, I have been instructed to inform you that a sum has been bequeathed to you in thanks for the resolution of her final affairs. In addition, a letter was found among her personal effects, intended for you. Should you wish to read it, with regard, Hubert Blaine. I glanced up. Holmes had returned to the window. A letter for you, Holmes. I have read it. And he took a slow pull from the pipe, the smoke curling in lazy wisps above his head. It contained a single line, he said at last. She wrote, "Let no man claim the truth without understanding the cost of its pursuit." I sat back, struck by the depth of the sentiment. Holmes offered no further elaboration, and I knew better than to press. Later that afternoon, Inspector Lestrade arrived unannounced, his bowler damp and his mustache twitching with rainwater. He gave Holmes a brisk nod and accepted my offer of tea with a grunt. "I came to tell you that Furnham has confessed," he said. "Said he'd never meant to harm her that. He only wanted the dagger back, that it belonged to his memory, to what they once shared. When she refused, he snapped." Holmes did not look up from the violin he was now tuning. The truth, albeit delayed, has its way of surfacing. Lestrade rubbed his hands over the fire. We also questioned Miss Lydia again. Poor girl blamed herself for not coming forward sooner. Said she thought she was protecting Miss Hargrave's dignity by staying silent about the past. I saw Holmes's mouth tighten. Dignity is a frail shield in the face of murder. But I will not fault her. She was navigating a labyrinth of emotion and loyalty, not unlike Furnham in his own misguided way. Lestrade cleared his throat. "Well, anyway, that's all. The Yard's closing the case. Just wanted you to know." And with that he left, his coat trailing a ribbon of water behind him. When the door shut, Holmes finally lifted the violin and drew the bow across the strings. A somber note filled the room, deep and slow, like the echo of memory itself. "You're thinking of Miss Hargrave again?" I ventured. "I am thinking of all the Hargraves, Watson, of the people who fade into history, remembered only for how they died rather than how they lived." He stood and moved to the bookshelf, retrieving a small leather-bound volume. Pressed between its pages, he showed me a faded photograph of a younger Miriam Hargrave, standing beside a man in uniform. Furnham, no doubt. They were laughing, their faces radiant. "She kept it until the end," Holmes murmured, "even as she refused him, even as she fought for distance. Some part of her held on." I looked at the image, then at Holmes. "And what of him?" Holmes returned the photo to the book. "He will face the consequences. The courts will speak. And perhaps when his sentence is passed, some measure of balance will be restored." Silence fell between us. Outside, the mist was beginning to lift, revealing a city that churned ever onward. Horses clattered along the stones, and children laughed in distant alleyways. Life, as it always did, resumed. I resumed my notes, writing the final paragraph slowly, thoughtfully. Holmes said nothing, only stared once more into the fire, where the last embers glowed like the eyes of forgotten ghosts. When I finished, he turned toward me, offering a faint smile. "Come, Watson. The day grows late, and I hear that Madame Rosalie has acquired a new violin from Naples. Let us indulge in music something, without blood on the strings. And so, with the mystery behind us and the air lighter, we stepped once more into the London fog, the lanterns beginning to glow, and the dagger of the dead now no more than an echo in our minds. Up, Watson, your presence is welcome. I've laid out the existing puzzle. He gestured to the ledger sheet. Entries listed our leads. Darius Corwin, antiquarian believed to be in Paris. Departure 13 Phi. Ahmad al-Malik, university lecturer. Also in Paris, seal of the circle of the silver dagger. Ceremonial dagger with ritual meaning. Symbolic weapon. Percival's fragment. Contents unknown, but evidently valuable enough to kill for. Now, Holmes said, we follow the men and their motives across borders. I require your medical and linguistic training. I nodded, and I suspect Professor al-Malik might hold clues to the fragment's nature. Precisely, Holmes replied. Let's begin in London, then plan our departure for Paris. Our first call was to Darius Corwin's antiquarian bookshop in Blackfriars. The street was narrow and glistening from last night's rain. A bell tinkled above the door. Shelves rose to the ceiling, weighted with leather-bound volumes and dusty parchment rolls under the flicker of half-dimers. A thin clerk in round spectacles looked up. Our proprietor, Mr. Corwin, closed the shop yesterday. He departed for Paris on the afternoon of the 13th. Expected stay is indefinite. Holmes paused. Do you recall the purpose of his journey? The clerk pushed back his glasses. He mentioned a private symposium on Eastern scripture at the Sorbonne. Antiquarian circles certain exclusives. Holmes inclined. And the shipping of Percival Willoughby's fragment? The clerk frowned. I believe Mr. Corwin assisted in its translation. He was eager to see its contents, though nothing official, you understand. Holmes nodded, pocketed the receipt for the shopkeeper's help, and we stepped into the damp air. The direction was clear. Paris, and soon. Next, we pressed on to Holborn to locate Ahmed al-Malik's former lodgings. The building was a modest boarding house with shutters drawn low. A landlady with pert glasses peered out as we rang. Are you detectives? She asked, voice sharp. Private inquiry, Holmes responded politely. For a former lodger, Ahmed al-Malik. She indicated. To a parlor. He left 2 nights ago. In a hurry, he said he feared being followed. He carried many Middle Eastern postcards, Jerusalem, Baghdad, Damascus. He looked troubled. Holmes leaned toward me. Prisoner of conscience or hunter of secrets? He whispered She offered an envelope. Holmes opened it and extracted a single monogrammed card, Café de la Paris. Precise, Holmes nodded. He may provide keys to Percival's fragment or explain the society's presence. Holmes returned to the fragment's seal a chipped silver shield with a serpent encircling a book. He produced a ring binder and one of Mycroft's invaluable memoranda describing a London-based group, the Circle of the Silver Dagger, known for their secret acquisitions of Eastern texts. The dagger, Percival's family heirloom, became a symbol the society co-opted. Holmes mused. Their seal on the desk indicates their presence in his study, or at least visitation. We are beyond simple theft. We are in ritual. How do we proceed? I asked. Holmes looked at me with satisfaction. We assemble our team and cross the channel. Lestrade will assist at the docks. Mycroft will post our inquiries internally among circles. But we must move quickly. This symposium at the Sorbonne may host both al-Malik and Corwin. That afternoon, Dr. Willoughby returned. His face, though tired, reflected renewed resolve. Holmes greeted him. "Dr. Willoughby, I trust you are better this morning?" He forced a soft smile. "Yes, I had hoped to assist. I thought you might." Holmes gestured to the fragment sealed in cloth. "We propose to travel to Paris tomorrow at first light. You are welcome to accompany, or remain in London." Willoughby's eyes brightened. "I will come. I want to honor Percival." Holmes nodded approvingly. "Very good. Your presence may aid us especially in matters of persuasion should we encounter acquaintances." Holmes spent the afternoon writing to Mycroft in Scotland Yard, sealed under confidential cover. He catalogued our evidence and requested copies, to be prepared for French officials. Later, as we ate a sparse supper broth and bread, I heard Holmes's cane tapping in the air. He looked at me. "There will be secrecy, my friend. We may shadow al-Malik and Corwin, but we must not appear, as their hunters, appear curious, scholarly. That seal could mislead. Let us disguise the investigation." I drank my broth. "I can adopt the role of a scholar of Oriental medicine that may explain my presence." Holmes smiled. "Excellent. I shall be a translator." He paused. Spatula expressed inquiries into the translation of ancient texts. "Perfectly fitting, Watson." Hours later, the street lay hushed, but Holmes labored in his study. He cross-referenced modern maps of Paris alleys with Percival's notes. Letters to the gallery of the Society arrived, invitations to symposiums, and reservations for a discreet hotel dotted 6 the next morning. We boarded the boat train at Charing Cross. The fragment was secured in my satchel. Percival's dagger lay in Holmes's coat. He pressed a small fragment of paper into my hand. "Colonum Fortier at Rue de Rivoli, 45. He may aid our inquiries." Holmes whispered, "This man was associated with Percival's acquisition. He is discreet and friendly." The train hummed. Onward, steam curling around our carriage. We settled in solemn silence. 5 passengers bound for Paris, each carrying a fragment of evidence and anticipation. As countryside rolled by toward Dover, I asked Holmes quietly, "What troubles you most, Corwin or al-Malik?" He studied the fragment of receipt in his book. "Both carry opportunity and risk. Corwin may have betrayed. Al-Malik may have fled in fear or for fear. Our approach must be balanced." He closed his eyes and exhaled. "Paris awaits." Arriving. In Paris at midday, we took a hansom to a small hotel near Opera. Mycroft's packet met us. It confirmed that both men had been seen at the Café de la Paix, accompanied by intermediate figures disguised as English scholars. Holmes unpacked. Quietly. "Tonight we dine at Café de la Paix, observe first, question later." Willoughby nodded, tear-bright but determined. That evening, as dusk settled and gas lamps flickered along the Champs-Élysées, we made our way to the café. In a quiet corner we sipped tea while Holmes watched patrons. He whispered, "There, Darius? Corwin, not alone, with an Egyptian gentleman distinguished likely al-Malik." I followed his gaze. Indeed, 2 men at a small table perusing volumes, glancing at each other and at our direction. Holmes murmured, "But note, they are calm." not conspiratorial. Perhaps they were followed? I swallowed. The dagger and seal may reflect more than murder initiation. Maybe. Holmes nodded. And we are the intruders. Let us observe discreetly. As midnight approached, the cafe crowded. Cigarette smoke curled among lyrical tones of cafe chords. Yet Holmes and I remained still. Focused. He touched my arm. Tomorrow. We engage with all Malik under respectful pose. I nodded, heart pounding. Holmes rose. Rest now. We have tomorrow's labyrinth yet to navigate. We returned to the hotel, our minds swirling with half-formed truths, the weight of the dagger and fragment pressing upon us still. Outside, Paris breathed softly, its secrets waiting for morning's light. Chapter 3. The Café Rendezvous. The early morning in Paris on March 17th carried a crisp, clarity air, fragrant, with freshly baked bread and river-washed stone. Holmes and I departed our Hotel Garni, mindful of Percival's fragment and dagger safely tucked away. The previous evening's subtle observations at Café de la Paix had offered little more than calm civility between Darius Corwin and Ahmed Malik, but enough to signal caution. Our approach today must be delicate. Holmes adjusted his cravat. We join them as scholars, Watson fellow custodians of Eastern lore. Curiosity will be our ally. One possessed my notebook and a polite air of inquiry, determined to keep pace with his steely stratagem. We entered the opulent cafe just after noon. Gilded mirrors reflected bustle and chatter. The maître d' led us to a quiet corner within view of two men seated in a recessed alcove. Their posture was composed, Corwin studying parchment, Malik tracing characters with a fountain pen. Holmes returned their gaze, then whispered, "Observe their gestures, neither hides. Both expect to be watched. Yet they remain calm. Neither seems directly aware of us." Holmes signaled the waiter. He ordered 2 espressos. He adjusted his posture, then spoke, voice warm, as though to a stranger met by fate. "Gentlemen, pardon our intrusion. We are fellows in historical manuscripts, Holmes and Watson from London. Might we join you?" Corwin, thin-faced and elegant, looked up. "If your interest is East, by all means." His tone was courteous but measured. Malik, gentle eyes, behind wire frames, inclined his head slowly. "Perhaps we might share progress." Holmes seated himself with casual confidence. "Your French is accented. Permit me to translate?" They both accepted. Holmes leaned forward with measured interest. The fragment, Percival Willoughby's, is said to contain text capable of rewriting known chronology. Yet its lines appear more poetic than factual. Malik took the scroll tied with silk. "It is not prophecy," he said softly. "It is memory of pain and of devotion. The script evokes mourning." Corwin interjected with academic tone. "Yet the society circle of the silver dagger interprets it as a culmination of lineage, hence the ritual blade is their symbol." Holmes nodded. "And the ceremony this morning on the Thames embankment?" A slight silence followed. Malik set down the scroll. "Percival expired defending the knowledge, his honor, his truth, the dagger cutting away falsehood." Corwin leaned back. "He died with honor. But some feared the fragment's content, not his integrity." Holmes watched for subtleties. Corwin's suppressed wince at some, Malik's trembling fingers. I intervened gently. Is the society divided, one faction protective, another hostile? Corwin replied in clipped tones. Academic groups often fracture. When ancient texts shake foundations, Percival's fragment may threaten someone's legacy. Holmes pressed. Did Percival hint at resistance or threats? Al-Malik lowered his gaze. He was disturbed, believed someone paid to silence him. Corwin clenched his jaw. A scholar with rivals dies unexpectedly. Does that surprise you? Holmes calibrated his voice. It does if no payment. Exchanged. What I saw on the embankment was ritual murder, not mischance. A messenger arrived with a folded note addressed to Al-Malik. He opened it with pale composure and read, "Tonight, bring the fragment to Rue de Rivoli. Midnight, come." Alone. Al-Malik's face tightened. Corwin prepared to speak, but Holmes silenced him with a glance. Holmes leaned forward. "May we accompany you tonight, to ensure no harm befalls us?" Al-Malik met Holmes's gaze. "No, this is my burden." Corwin sighed. "This was a meeting I did not arrange." Holmes nodded. "Then we will inform the proper authorities, Scotland. Yard, Inspector Lestrade before midnight. Post-lunch, Holmes and I visited the British Embassy to phone Lestrade. Holmes reported the threat and set up a discreet watch at Rue de Rivoli. With an assurance, we returned to the cafe. Corwin. And Al-Malik thanked us with a brief nod. Holmes stood slowly. "Give no signs after dusk. I will send a messenger." We departed with the afternoon drifting into lamplit anticipation. Moonlight fell on cool pavement as Holmes, Watson, and Lestrade's two detectives waited outside an unremarkable townhouse. Shadows pooled beneath STREETLIG etched within. Al-Malik walked toward a low window from which muffled voices drifted. Holmes motioned to Lestrade to follow at a discreet distance. Al-Malik entered the building. Seconds later, a scuffle erupted. The detectives rushed in as a man slammed a door. Laughter sharp and cruel. The fragment lay on a side table, papers strewn, flickering candles. Lestrade's officers stormed in, shouting. A figure lunged, but collapsed with a gasp. Dagger and thigh-knot Percival's, but an identical ceremonial blade. Holmes rushed in. Beside me, the intruder lay pale-eyed, grinning foolishly. Lestrade cuffed him. "Your bet, Holmes," interrupted softly. "Not a murderer, but a messenger." He believed Al-Malik was the final key-bearer. "During the arrest, we recovered the intruder's note. You know not the blade you wield. Knowledge lies only in memory shared." Under the intruder's murmured confession, the blade was not to kill Al-Malik, but to test his resolve. Holmes. Observe the folding of robes, minor details forming a pattern. After Al-Malik's safety was assured, Holmes accompanied him back to the Café de la Paix in dawn's dim glow. The professor delivered his thanks to Holmes with solemn emotion. Corwin nodded quietly at Holmes. Acknowledging the debt. Back at Baker Street, Holmes laid the night's notes before me. Note: the blade was not silver. A copy, the message. His symbolic ritual challenge, not death. The society still watches. He opened the cipher note. Midnight under the Eiffel is unlikely, but under shadows of Rue de Rivoli, alone. He returned his gaze to the ledger. We must find who knows both Corwin's and Al-Malik's secrets, and who can copy Percival's blade. Holmes closed the ledger. They'd test willingness to share knowledge. Next test could be lethal. We identify that society and seal this fragment's fate. I nodded tightly. Holmes added, Corwin remains in Paris. Al-Malik might reveal it tomorrow. We must remain quiet, but ready. Chapter 4. The Silver Covenant. The Seine lay dark and silent, curled in the faint gold of gas lamps as we crossed Pont Neuf that damp morning. Holmes's gaze remained vigilant across the river. Banks' nostrils raised, the linings of his coat brushing against the carriage door. He gestured for the driver to halt. Light here, he murmured. I wish to inhale the city's mood. We stepped into the fog-wrapped air. The carriage rolled onward. Holmes inhaled slowly. This city, he said, voice low, hides more than it reveals. We must navigate with care. Our first engagement was with Ahmed al-Malik, whose small flat near the Sorbonne was so silent it might have been a cloistered library. The walls held Persian prints. A single candle burned beside the fragment, protected under glass. Al-Malik greeted us at the door, exhausted but relieved. You came despite last night. Holmes inclined. We appear risk. Our presence ensures light. Al-Malik led us to a simple desk. He tapped the glass covering Percival's fragment. Through his manner, I sensed profound respect. He began to speak. He explained the fragment's text, once etched into a temple wall, invokes memory as legacy. But he believed someone would pervert it. Holmes took notes. A key concept. Not prophecy, memory. Al-Malik nodded. Yes, but the society sees in it validation of lineage. Holmes's sharp glance. Lineage and dominion over ancient patrimony. They test you all inheritors through replicas of Percival's ceremonial dagger. And Ezekiel, began Al-Malik, pausing. Holmes clicked his pipe. Is his name taken from the biblical seer? Al-Malik lowered his gaze. They choose names suited to trial. Ezekiel's test was isolation and threat. Holmes examined the copy dagger slowly, head tilting as he watched its curves. He spoke as if conferring with a pupil. This dagger silver ringed with Arabic script, purported to invoke judgment. The original was Kurdish silver-handed down. This copy, however, carries Syrian markings intentionally forged. Al-Malik realized the blade I carried did not cry traitor, but this one it screams that I was first tested. Holmes nodded. Not to kill you, but to initiate fear. He wanted to see your response. I leaned in. Was Percival tested this? We too with a mock arrest or ritual duel, but he died. Their ritual, the embankment murder, that was Ezekiel's final assessment. As we spoke, a letter slipped under the door. Al-Malik grabbed it, hands shaking. He opened it. I read over his shoulder. Brother Al-Malik, do not trust the foreign scholar or English facade. The circle's future is in your heart alone. The next test awaits at midnight's gathering. Ezekiel watches. His voice trembled. They know I confide. Holmes's face sharpened. We must move quickly. He stood, offering reassurance. We will attend, but on our terms. Holmes and I traveled in a hired brougham to a discreet museum library near Rue de Rivoli, where we found Darius Corwin consulting with a small group of scholars. Corwin looked drawn but composed. Holmes greeted him gently, voice light. Mr. Corwin, a dangerous parable unfolds, it seems. Corwin sighed. They expected me at the ceremony. I refused. So Ezekiel came with the blade. He looked at Holmes. I fear for all Malik and the fragment. Holmes set a hand on the scholar's shoulder. We will not let this spiral unchecked. Corwin nodded. I've arranged to help a metal worker knowledgeable of ceremonial weaponry. He arrives soon. From within a shadowed alcove emerged Anne Delacroix, bearing a satchel. Delacroix was a stout man, hands scarred, eyes wary, hair flecked with gray. Holmes produced a copy dagger for his scrutiny. Delacroix set it upon a black velvet cloth. This silver alloy is distinct 80 of imported Syrian metal, likely from Idlib. The craftsmanship is amateurish in outline, but bearing ritual symbols is intentional. It speaks of haste, not stealth. Holmes nodded. So Ezekiel, or his agent, seeks to broadcast rather than conceal. They wear their ritual as a badge. Corwin's voice softened. They claim supremacy in knowledge. They believe fear selects the worthy. Holmes pressed. Then tonight we test them for ourselves. As Delacroix spoke, a muffled knock sounded at the library door. A nervous, pale clerk froze mid-step. Peering through the glass, he saw figures waiting. The door opened on two masked individuals in night coats. Their presence froze our small group. Delacroix's voice faltered. Their presence, Ezekiel, is here. Holmes stood. Low, calm. Corwin, Delacroix come with us. We have a safe path. Watson will decoy outside. I stepped forward. Follow me through the eastern exit. Corwin clutched the fragment box. Delacroix, fear etched into his gaze, followed with quick steps. Holmes held distance. We draw no weapons, but we send a warning. At the rear door, Holmes pressed a secret latch. We slipped into a narrow alley. Holmes paused at the opening, scanning for backs or faces. Once clear, we moved swiftly until a waiting hansom took. "Use away." Holmes instructed the driver to take them to our safe house near O.D. Acute on Dot. He turned to me. They know of our interest and equate it with threat. Let fear become their burden. By midnight, Al-Malik, Corwin, and Delacroix were safe. Our small haven consisted of a dimly lit table, 4 chairs, and 2 candles. Holmes spread documents on the table, the copy blade, the cipher note, the invitation embossed Ezekiel. He explained quietly. We know the society's layout. Ritual. Initiation through symbol, followed by selective salvo against outsiders. Their next step, the masked ceremony tonight at Hotel de Ville. Al-Malik looked away, hesitant. What do they seek to test? Holmes tapped a foil edge of the invitation. A willingness to disclose memory. Ezekiel demands intellectual surrender. Delacroix spoke softly. They intend to strip participants of knowledge or trust that it serves them. Corwin shook his head. I will not attend. But they may force me, Holmes said. Our aim is to identify Ezekiel and to secure Percival's fragment. Holmes paced. We must infiltrate the ceremony as masked guests. I've prepared invitations. We wear mundane masks, simple, and claim membership by purchase of entry. The circle is not disciplined in ownership like the secret one. Al-Malik swallowed. I shall attend, to prove allegiance or pass through. Holmes nodded. And if Ezekiel is there, we uncover him. You show them Percival's blade, the original. Al-Malik shivered. Would that appease them? That is unknown, Holmes stated. But tonight we confront. Tomorrow we decide. Late in the evening, I accompanied Holmes and Al Malik down Rue St. Honor toward the ceremonial hall. Gas lights flickered, breaths caught in stone alleys. Inside, masked figures congregated. Shadows wove among muted voices. Holmes slipped Al Malik a small box containing Percival's silver dagger. He whispered, "If Ezekiel confronts you, lay the blade at his feet, and speak of memory's sanctity." Al Malik nodded, trembling. Holmes placed a hand on his shoulder. "I am beside you." In the dim arch our group paused, and the ceremony awaited. Holmes exhaled softly. "The hour nears. He and I stepped into the hall. Chapter 5. The masked assembly. The night air over. Paris had taken on an almost sacred hush by the time Holmes, Watson, and Professor Al Malik neared the Hotel de Ville. Street lamps cast lamplit pools on the wet cobblestones, and a faint perfume of spring blossoms mingled with the cooler river scents. The trio paused beneath the grand carved archway, the entrance to a ballroom both imposing and inviting. A hush of trepidation settled over them. Holmes lowered his voice to a whisper. "Remember, Watson, presence over panic. We stand not as intruders, but as seekers of truth." Professor Al Malik, his hand trembling around Percival's original dagger's case, nodded in muted agreement. His eyes flicked behind their masks, betraying the tension beneath his scholarly calm. Inside, vaulted ceilings rose like ancient domes, their plasterwork gilded with faded frescoes that hinted at long-forgotten ceremonies. At the center, a massive crystal chandelier, its candles aglow, threw fractured light across rows of masked figures. The attire was sumptuous. Velvet coats, silk shimmering in dim gold, delicate lace and embroidery. Most masks bore the serpent and book, emblem in silver an austere badge of unity. A hush fell as the trio entered. Holmes exchanged a light nod with Watson. Professor Al Malik swallowed hard. Holmes placed his gloved hand on Watson's arm. "Observe speakings, not watchmen." Amid the throng, two men approached a masked greeter, who led them to a low table at the foot of the dais. The sofas, plush red upholstery, offered little comfort to their nerves, but they seated themselves, alert and silent. A solitary figure, tall and deliberate, ascended the dais. A hooded cloak framed a slender shape. No features showed, yet authority radiated from every measured step. The figure lit a hanging torch. Shadows swayed across the assembly, drawing every gaze inward. One by one, masked individuals around the line stepped forward, chanting in Near Eastern dialects. The ambient sound choral, discipline wove through the hall. Holmes subtly motioned to Watson and Al Malik. "Listen for fissures. The slight misalignment reveals rank descent." Nearby, a woman shifted her small gesture, a rustle of silver lace. Holmes noted the shimmer and the intensity of her watchfulness. From the dais, a voice calm, resonant with authority, spoke in measured French. "Brothers and keepers of ancient truth, let the serpent's flame guide us toward integrity. Tonight we offer our test." Within the lit circle, two masked figures approached, one bearing Percival's coppered dagger in ritual fold, the other holding Al Malik's original, sheathed yet distinct in its carved hilt. The man with the replica placed it carefully at the foot of the dais, bowing briefly. The other ascended, halting before Ezekiel. "I present the authentic blade." The disciple intoned, Holmes recognized Al-Malik's still hand within his velvet-lined case. The dagger's polished silver caught dim flame its presence brave. Among silent watchers, Holmes leaned closer to Al-Malik, voice low. "Your memory will speak now." The professor nodded, stepping forward with quiet dignity. His voice, steady and clear, spoke powerful French. This blade belonged to Percival Willoughby, collector, scholar, friend. His use of the original was not for lineage, but for protection of thought. He carried a fragment of memory-etched text, demanding integrity, not dominion. A ripple of reaction cascaded through the hall. Some masks tilted, others straightened with disapproval. Holmes spotted the masked woman's silver threads glinting, leaning forward. The serpent book emblem centered on her forehead. Ezekiel, head bowed, listened. A sudden voice cold and clipped sliced. Through the hush, emotion hides fallacy. Knowledge is claim, not memory. The masked woman spoke again, and the test remains. Who among us stands ready to relinquish power? She leveled her glance at Al-Malik, and through her mask Holmes saw uncompromising resolve. Holmes stood, his voice echoing in the hall as he cast aside the pretense of civility. His French, crisp and commandingly polite, broke the symphony of tension. If knowledge is power, then memory must be the voice of that power. Percival's death did not claim the fragment, his words remain. We ask Ezekiel, is your covenant of memory or mastery? A ripple ran through the room. Masks shifted uneasily. Ezekiel's voice responded softly. He spoke truth, but did he divert from the covenant? Holmes said quietly, stepping forward, the covenant demands honesty, not ritual murder. Percival died for speaking memory, not lineage. The masked woman moved forward onto the dais, voice ringing. Then show us his blade. Let memory decide. A hush fell. Farnsworth's original dagger lay before them, silent witness to words, memory, and ritual. Ezekiel floated through the gathering, quickly lifting the blade to examine. At his touch, a gasp. The imprint of Percival's name, tiny, elegant, etched into the hilt, stood clear. Only the genuine blade bore that inscription. Holmes saw the flicker. Ezekiel paused. Mask tipping, the woman's voice rang louder. He lies. He stole lineage. But another voice, quiet, rich, countered. No, look upon it, sons of memory. This blade bears the seal of sacrificial memory. Chaos erupted. Masked figures shoved forward in anger. One yanked at Watson, another pressed against Holmes. The woman aimed a dagger, flash at them. Reckless dot in the melee, Watson parried with his cane. Holmes grabbed Al-Malik's arm, and for a moment the world spun a whirl of masks and fury. Amid shouts, the duplicate dagger clattered to the floor, its ritual ring lost in the chaos. Holmes, loud and clear, called, "Stand back. No more false tests." His voice cut through confusion. Slowly the crowd parted, eyes full of fear, fury, revelation. Ezekiel, holding the genuine dagger aloft, spoke. "You dishonored the covenant, but perhaps the blade itself remembers the breach." He placed it gently atop the replica. Tonight, memory triumphs over might. He dropped the ceremonial torch, signaling close. Masked figures melted into shadows, and halls emptied rapidly, some concealing faces, others abandoning robes. Holmes hooked Watson's arm. "Move quickly, Watson." They guided Al-Malik and the woman who dropped her, Mask without haste toward the side exit and into waiting hansoms. The masked woman offered Holmes a nod before slipping away. Holmes protected her face from the wind and said quietly, "She knows more than she reveals." Back at the hotel, Holmes placed both daggers on the desk, genuine and replica. Watson asked, "What did she see?" Holmes studied the mask, then shook his head. Her calm fear speaks volumes. She carries Ezekiel's doubt and chooses memory. Malik examined the blade. Percival's memory lives. Holmes closed the distance. Yet questions remain. Who is this woman? Ezekiel's challenger or his successor? Watson leaned forward. Next, we unmask her. Holmes pushed away the replica. That blade is symbolic no more. It stays here. Then he turned to Watson. Tonight we rest. Tomorrow we search for the woman-seek dialogue and find who wields the Circle's second covenant. He paused, his silhouette framed by lamplight through lace. Asterisk memory won tonight, but knowledge remains hidden. We must shine light. Chapter 6. The Woman Behind. The masked Paris's early morning mist lay soft and low across cobblestones when Holmes rose before dawn. The twin daggers, Percival's genuine silver blade, and its forgery rested side by side on the desk in the drawing-room, illuminated by a single flickering lamp. Their silent juxtaposition spoke volumes. One held truth, the other illusion. Holmes stood there, cane in hand, staring intently before finally breaking the morning's hush. "Watson," he said, voice steady, "we have forced the Circle to reveal a fissure, but what of its architect? We must discover the masked woman's identity. She is the keystone to our understanding." I nodded, pushing aside my slumber. We had returned late from the Hotel de Ville, heart still pounding from the ritual confrontation, and no one slept. Well, that night, the atmosphere in our chambre was thick with purpose. By mid-morning, Holmes and I sat at a rickety wooden table by a window facing Rue de l'Audien. He had spread across it our dossier, Madame Lucille Ravenel, protector during the ceremony, calm under danger, masked woman, retained the dagger's authenticity. Unmasked quietly, Ezekiel still a mystery. Principal authority, fragments and forgery. Central artifacts, Percival's memory, the emotional and factual thrust. Corwin's network, scholars, sympathetic to memory over mastery. Malik, shaken, yet resolute. I sipped strong Parisian. Tea. Holmes's brow furrowed as he traced lines between clues and motives. "Look here, Watson," he murmured, pointing to Lucille's actions at the ritual. She not only stood against Ezekiel, but also subtly halted the blade's rise, her timing deliberate. She moved not as a bystander, but as a guardian of memory. "What do you deduce?" I asked. "That she belongs to a faction, perhaps a silent alliance within the Circle," he replied. "One that reveres the Covenant's higher meaning, but rejects its use of terror." He drummed his fingers. "But does she aim to dismantle the society or reform it?" Our silence was broken only by the distant clatter of carriage wheels and the soft hum of a city awakening. At mid-morning, a courier appeared with a plain envelope. Inside, written in fine handwriting, was an invitation. "Lucille awaits you at noon in the Luxembourg Garden Pavilion. Alone." Holmes slid the slip into his pocket and mused. "She tests us now. Trust, friend." Our departure was quiet. The air was crisp, scented by early blooms and the paths were still half empty. Under the West Pavilion's stone columns, Lucille Ravenel awaited. She stood with her back turned, gazing at a bed of lavender and tulips. As we stepped toward her, the garden's spring scent enveloped us. Holmes approached first. "Madame Ravenel," he began, voice respectful, "we come on your invitation." She turned slowly, her hand reaching for her dark glasses. Her mask was absent, but the guarded expression remained ingrained. "I am Lucille Ravenel." She introduced herself to Watson, then Holmes. Her voice was quiet, measured. "I intervened to save Professor Al-Malik and Percival's memory." Holmes nodded slightly. "Your arrival inside the circle was unexpected and well-timed. You risked much." She sighed, glancing at the fountain's rippling water. "I once worked with Percival in London translating the fragment at the British Museum and the National Library. He carried the original dagger in trust, not in pride." Watson stepped forward. "Why align yourself with Al-Malik now? Why come to Paris?" Her eyes flickered. Ezekiel's vision diverged from Percival's. He turned the ritual into theater of fear. "I intervened at the ceremony out of loyalty to memory over power." She paused. "I go by Lucille now, but my allegiance remains with the man Percival was." Holmes folded his arms. "Why reveal yourself now? We could have proceeded without you." She met his gaze, steady and unwavering. "Because inside the circle I had no authority. Ezekiel's influence silenced dissent. I had to show the world that memory still holds weight, that the fragment is not his to misuse." Her admission hung in the air, the heart of the conflict. Holmes regarded her. "You possess more knowledge than you have shared." Lucille took a deep breath. "I can lead you to Corwin's contact scholars who gathered intelligence on Ezekiel. They've operated secretly within the circle, supporting remembrance over self-glory." Watson glanced at Holmes, acknowledging the bold step. That afternoon, we convened at our safe house. Al-Malik, Corwin, and Delacroix gathered by candlelight. Lucille presented herself with calm authority. "Good," Holmes said, addressing the group. "We now form a council of memory." Lucille spread out small papers with names, times, meeting rooms inside the Rue de Rivoli Library, and allied addresses. "We will discover Ezekiel's identity in the heart of his council," Holmes declared. "Tonight we attempt infiltration." Corwin gulped. "To expose him, could tear the society apart, or provoke them." Holmes nodded. "Indeed, but reform requires light." Lucille spoke softly. "My contacts wait tonight within the council. Room behind sealed doors under Rue de Rivoli. Ezekiel dwells there. We must reach them before he suppresses dissenters." Al-Malik swallowed. "I will stand by you." Holmes drew a careful map on parchment. "Entrance through rear door off courtyard. Whispers passcodes to gain entry. Locate ledger. Room containing council minutes and member roster. Present, dagger, and fragment to verify memory's supremacy. Unmask Ezekiel, or at least gather his name." He looked at Lucille. "You must guide us inside." She nodded. "I know the guard rotations." Watson packed medical supplies and clothing. Corwin collected papers. Delacroix readied lanterns. Lucille handed Holmes a small brass key. From one of the librarians, Holmes saluted. "Then we move with the tide." At 10:30, under the cover of darkness and a sparse drizzle, We approached the library's courtyard. Entrance shadows draped the stone walls like veils. Lucille led quietly. Holmes signaled 2 knocks. A hushed reply. "Remember the daggers." Lucille slid the key into the lock. They slipped inside. Corridors were narrow and lined with archival books. The smell of dusty page and mildew was thick. Our group advanced, footsteps silent. A door at the end, marked "Sale du Conseil," stood locked. Lucille inserted another key and turned it. Within, long tables covered in vellum manuscripts and candles. Figures sat in semicircle masks, removed, hoods down. They turned. Ezekiel stood at the far end, face hidden in low light, flanked by 2 men cloaked in black. Holmes stepped forward, voice firm. "We come in memory, not fear." The counsel hesitated. Ezekiel's voice cut through the tension. "You trespass." "Well," Holmes answered, "we bring Percival's fragment and the genuine blade. Memory must be heard." Lucille walked forward, carrying the knife and fragment. 2 men stepped to intercept. Holmes held up a hand. "Let us pass." They were allowed within. Holmes placed the blade and fragment on the council table. Silence fell. Ezekiel spoke at last, voice soft but authoritative. "This is no theatrics. These are trespassers." His gaze fell upon Lucille. "Who is this traitress of the circle?" Lucille held firm. "I am the one who challenged you before. I stand for Percival and the covenant within memory." Ezekiel tilted his head. "What is the covenant you speak of?" Holmes answered, "That knowledge is sacred. That memory belongs to all, not few. That fear must not guard what truth demands." He gestured to the blade and fragment. "You wish us to bow before symbols. We challenge you to bow before substance." A gasp. Council members stirred. Some scowled, others nodded in cautious assent. Ezekiel's mask remained intact, but his posture wavered. Lucille added softly. One scholar remarked, "Memory is fragile, but destruction of it is tyranny. We claim neither tyranny nor fragility, only justice." She turned to the masked council. "Reveal his name or confess you fear your own covenant." Ezekiel paused. The council deliberated in whispers while candles sputtered. Watson and Corwin sketched notes in silence. Delacroix watched Gates. Al-Malik held his hands with restraint. Finally, Ezekiel removed his mask, revealing a scholar's face, handsome, gaunt eyes rimmed with tension. He spoke. "I am Theodore Marceau." Silence. Holmes nodded softly. "Memory named you." "The covenant speaks." Lucille stepped forward. "You either lead us toward memory or remain in your shadow. Tomorrow the library's minutes will be public." Holmes gestured for quiet. They turned, blades and fragment in hand. "Your name is set, but what matters is your choice. Will you uphold memory or bury it?" They slipped out the way they came, doors closing behind them. When they stepped into the courtyard, dawn's pale luminescence glowed. Back at 221B, Holmes locked the daggers away with tender care. He said to Watson, "Theodore Marceau is exposed, but will he reform or retaliate?" Watson offered the morning newspaper. "Here report of missing scholar in Paris." Holmes scanned the print, lips compressed. "They are already moving. We must follow them back to London prepared for what Marceau brings." He tapped his cane. "Memory is no longer passive. Now it is weapon and shield." Chapter 7. Returned to the lion's den, the dawn over Dover was pale and hesitant as our carriage rolled toward the quay. Paris receded behind a misty veil, leaving us only with the weight of the preceding night's revelations. Holmes sat silent, eyes fixed on the silver-tipped handle of Percival's dagger, cradled in its case. Lucille Ravenel and Al Malik sat quietly to one side, their expressions reflecting both relief and anticipation. Marceau's betrayal may become our advantage, Holmes said at last, clutching the case, but we are returning to a different. Battlefield London circles are tight-knit, and Marceau's influence may have spread. We must tread with caution. The Channel crossing was a study in disquieted normalcy. Seagulls drifted overhead. Ferry workers barked orders, and Holmes paced the deck. Lucille, leaning into the wind, murmured to Al Malik about the library's protocols. Watson helped her steady the fragments box. A quiet companionship bound them together, united by purpose yet aware of the peril to come. Below decks, Holmes worked quickly, drafting letters to Mycroft and Scotland Yard, a full account of Marceau's exposure, a warning of possible reprisals, and a formal request for assistance in London. He poured his words like an architect planning a sanctuary dot by the time we arrived in Folkestone. The letters were ready sealed and dispatched with trusted couriers. Holmes stood aside, offering, Al Malik the dagger. We shall shield you as best as we can. Keep it close. Crossing into London, the early spring haze blotted out the Thames and dimmed the city's edges until we reached Baker Street. Inside 221B, Mrs. Hudson's candlestick flickered a warm welcome. Holmes laid the portfolio on the table. Daggers, fragment, Marceau's name and address, letters, and plans for his departure. Lucille cleared her throat softly, earning Holmes's attention. Now, what is your plan, Mr. Holmes? He looked at his assembled allies. Marceau's exposed, but not subdued. He can still cripple Memory's allies. We must disarm him politically and judicially. We return tomorrow to the library, confront him there, and ensure support from Scotland Yard. He paused. Tonight we must prepare mentally. As evening crept in behind the smoky windows, the shared candles cast shifting shadows. Holmes circled the dog-eared London maps and ledgers, pinning letters and names to key locations. The British Museum, the Old Bailey, the Foreign Office Archives. Lucille retrieved her envelope. A new invitation, signed Tudor. Holmes frowned. He's drawing us in. Watson's face tightened. Could be a trap. Holmes nodded. Exactly. We will. Attend but under our terms. Al Malik, pale but resolved, listened. We stand with you. At breakfast the following morning, Mycroft Holmes arrived unannounced. His austere presence filled the room. He regarded Lucille and Al Malik before focusing on Sherlock. Your missive was compelling. Marceau's disappearance piqued interest, but the British Museum caught wind of a ciphered text, perhaps your fragment. Holmes inclined. They will assist with oversight. Mycroft continued. Inspector Lestrade has assigned 2 men to your cause. They're discreet, no public scandal, and the museum director is willing to conduct an independent review under my brother's oversight. Lucille exhaled quietly. We may succeed. Mycroft's tone softened ever so briefly. Knowledge survives because we protect it. I trust you all to do so. Without another word he departed, leaving hope in his wake. That afternoon, a sedate letter arrived sealed with a library crest. Insinuations are dangerous. Truth prevails in open halls. Meet me in my office at the British. Library, 8 p.m. Holmes leaned forward. His move. He wants to negotiate. Perhaps expose us or trap us. Watson's voice shook slightly. Or he seeks to regain control with reconciliation. Holmes nodded. Which is why we go, but with choices. When darkness fell, allies assembled in 221B. Lucille handed money to support Al-Malik. Corwin arrived for strategy. Two of Lestrade's men stood in the corner known, yet unnoticed. Holmes paced the room before the British Library. We enter as cautious friends with open dossier. We offer scrutiny, not pardon. Lucille whispered. He fears public exposure. Holmes traced his cane along the map. Then we shine the light and leave him no shadow. At 8 p.m. our small party arrived. Holmes, Watson, Lucille, Al-Malik, Corwin, Mycroft, and 2 inspectors. The library's hush welcomed them. Marceau's office door waited down the corridor. Holmes looked first at the library's stone floor, breathing in its gravitas. Then he raised his hand. Gentlemen and Marceau, we ask to speak in full transparency. 8. Behind closed doors we entered Marceau's office, a narrow room choked with books and manuscripts. Marceau stood behind his desk, unmasked but withdrawn. He closed the door with a soft click. You have my attention. Holmes stepped forward. Our purpose is simple, to restore memory's honor and ensure the covenant no longer serves ritual. Fear. Marceau studied Holmes. And what of Percival's fragment? Holmes held it aloft. It shall be reviewed by the British Museum under supervision, conducted openly and recorded for future generations. Marceau's voice trembled. Slightly. That fragment revealed secrets I believed sacred, not public spectacle. A tense silence followed. Lestrade's inspector cleared his throat. Lestrade spoke. You've broken protocol, Marceau. Ritual death is beyond council's bounds. Marceau finally spoke. I sought to protect tradition. Holmes smiled thinly. Tradition built on. Fear will always collapse. Marceau's expression hardened. So you unmasked me? Holmes nodded. Yes, and now we offer you 2 choices. Help preserve the covenant's integrity, or face judicial consequences. Corwin stepped forward. You know what memory chooses. Marceau's eyes narrowed. He exhaled. Very well. He signed a formal declaration. No further rituals. Fragments submitted to museum panel. Transparency guaranteed. Marceau will resign council chair. Holmes folded the agreement. Lucille whispered to Al-Malik, We've won. 11. Exiting the Lions. Then the group left the library. Night had softened to a mist. Mycroft paused by Holmes. Your conduct ensures tomorrow belongs to knowledge. Holmes nodded. Memory prevailed. Back on Baker Street, candles lit again. Holmes placed Percival's fragment next to the British Museum's receipt. He said quietly, Memory never dies, Watson. Sometimes we just need to remind the world. Watson smiled. And you reminded it brilliantly. Holmes tapped his cane. Tomorrow I do nothing. He paused, eyes sharp. But the world will speak. Chapter 8. Echoes in the gallery. The morning light filtered through the high, mullioned windows of the British Museum in muted hues, as if the building itself knew the gravity of the day. The corridors were hushed. save for the gentle footsteps of curators and the low murmur of researchers. Holmes led our group: Watson, Lucille Ravenel, Professor Al Malik, Darius Corwin, and a discreet contingent from Scotland Yard, into the print room, where Percival's fragment lay encased in glass, flanked by the pristine British Museum receipt, and a solemn guardian ready to attest to its provenance. Holmes paused before the case, eyes tracing the faded script on the fragment. "This," he declared softly, "marks a new chapter in its destiny, no longer hidden or feared, but preserved." He turned to the assembled circle. "Our task today is not mere safekeeping. It is to affirm to the public that memory should be free from private tyranny." The museum director, a gaunt yet dignified man named Sir Adrian Fenton, approached with measured steps. His gray eyes held both relief and anticipation. "Mr. Holmes, you have exceeded expectations. We intend to exhibit the fragment under controlled conditions, with translations visible alongside, so the public may read and reflect." Lucille bowed her thanks. "Thank you, Sir Adrian. Percival would have wanted no less," Al Malik added, voice trembling still with emotion. "He wrote as a tribute to memory, to history. Let it now be heard." Holmes nodded. "Indeed. And this exhibition will serve as a bulwark against the misuse of the fragment by powerful enclaves." As the final preparations proceeded, Holmes and Watson wandered among the galleries. They passed relics of antiquity, from Egyptian funerary figurines to Greek urns, all artifacts of memory in stone and clay. Holmes stopped before an Assyrian relief. "Memory carves itself into walls, Watson, but always through witness and curation. Tonight's reveal places Percival's memory within civic consciousness." I replied. "They'll attempt to undermine it. The Council of Marceau, now denuded, will not vanish so quietly." Holmes arched an eyebrow. "Precisely why tomorrow's unveiling must be under secure light." By afternoon, Scotland Yard's 2 civil officers had discreetly secured the gallery's back corridors. Inspector Lestrade, his brow creased with relief, greeted Holmes. "They're gathering. Some scholars, journalists, others I don't trust." Holmes studied him. "Keep watch, Lestrade. I may need your men if anything arises." He paused. Let no secret hand disguise itself in civility. As evening approached, a hush enveloped the gallery. Lucille, Watson, and Al Malik joined. Holmes before the display cabinet. Tension wove the air like static. Holmes's gaze, as though reading an unseen script, drifted towards the reserved seating where VIP guests awaited. Moments later, the curator approached. "A lady wishes to see you, Monsieur Holmes. She will remain behind the rope unless invited." Holmes inclined. "Show her through." A vase-lipped woman emerged, tall, hair the color of tarnished copper, cheeks pale. She paused before Lucille's eyes, gliding over the group before resting on Holmes. "My apologies for the intrusion. I am Isabella Kendrick, late of the Society's British Circle. I represented memory before the covenant was bent to ritual." Holmes observed her coolly. "Miss Kendrick, your timing is intriguing." Isabella offered a soft nod. "I come with confession and demand." She produced a small packet sealed, with wax bearing the serpent book emblem. "These are minutes of council debates written during Marceau's leadership. They were hidden but not forgotten." Holmes accepted them. "Precious." He looked at Lucille. "You knew of these?" "Lucille." shook her head. No, but their release could prove that Marceau remained secretive, not receptive to public memory. Isabella continued, voice steady. I will donate them to the museum, on condition they accompany the fragments exhibit, so the public may read the whole context. Al-Malik exhaled. And then memory of how the covenant was compromised will be recorded. Holmes nodded. A prudent condition. We must ensure no archival tampering. As they spoke, Lestrade stepped forward. Inspector Kendrick, are you prepared to testify? Isabella dipped her head. I am. Her eyes met Lucille's. We share precincts of loyalty, though I erred by silence. Lucille smiled gently. Redemption is memory affirmed. Holmes offered Isabella a chair. Welcome to our circle of truth. At 8 p.m., Holmes gathered with them in a private gallery adjacent to the main hall. A bench beneath the fragments display, lamplight soft yet focused, illuminated the artifact. On a side table lay Isabella's pages, the council minutes. Also present were 2 framed panels translations of Percival's text and the Covenant, excerpts for reference. Lestrade remarked, We'll have press outside, Mr. Holmes. 2 doormen approachable, 2 observing. We've arranged lockdown protocol afterward, Holmes acknowledged. Ensure no fragmentation, no missing papers. The public must receive wholeness. At precisely 8:30, Holmes stepped forward. Press. Pens lifted, reporters leaned. He began. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand before an object whose physical form is small, yet whose significance stretches far beyond its glass case. This fragment and its author, Percival Willoughby, were targets of a private covenant that sought to isolate knowledge through fear. He paused, gaze encompassing Lucille, Isabella, Al-Malik. Tonight, we restore memory to its rightful place, among us all, he gestured. Exhibit now visible, oppressed no more. He signaled to the curator, who flicked the lock away from the knee-board case. The fragment glimmered, gasps echoed. Reporters scribbled rapidly. Isabella's lips curved. Lucille exhaled with emotion. Holmes observed the gathered guests' expressions, some incredulous, some triumphant. One man scholar in dark suits stepped forward, voice thin. The minutes? Holmes gestured to the side panel, which contained edited council notes, signed by Kendrick. The scholar's face paled as he read. The hush deepened. Holmes watched as the scholar sank, and a murmur rose. The covenant is tarnished. Lestrade stepped aside, observing. Holmes nodded to Lucille. You did well, she smiled, eyes glistening. We all did. After the event, the group moved toward the back exit. Holmes carefully replaced fragment and minutes in security vaults. Lestrade quietly locked each case away. Holmes offered a brief nod to Lestrade. Memory is now safe for tonight. Lestrade responded with quiet resolve. Back at 221B, midnight candles cast amber light on the room. Holmes placed a key into a wooden box, the world's copy of Percival's fragment and Kendrick's minutes, to be used only by scholars in the years ahead. Lucille and Isabella exchanged gentle words of gratitude. Al-Malik touched Holmes's shoulder. We did it. Holmes nodded slowly. Yet the covenant will survive, but now shadow has been replaced by transparency. He looked to Watson. We do not celebrate not yet. The world must remember why we fight for knowledge. Watson smiled softly. And we will remind it one fragment at a time. Holmes tapped the glass dome around the fragment. First there was memory, now testimony. He leaned back, pipe alight, eyes distant. Let us rest, for tomorrow holds the next challenge. Chapter 9. Whispers of the past. The morning after the museum's unveiling, London's air felt sharper, lessening the tension that had gripped our small band. Holmes rose early, seated before the large window in 221B, gazing out over the rooftops of Marylebone. His tobacco pipe emitted thin spirals of smoke, while his thoughts seemed distant yet preoccupied. "Watson," he said without looking up, "we have safeguarded memory, but the Covenant's influence persists. We must watch for its resurgence, or for those who would turn our triumph into tragedy." His words lingered like the trace of smoke, and I nodded, aware of the delicate balance he sought, one between revelation and vigilance. Over breakfast, Lucille Ravenel joined us once again, her features calm, yet shadowed. She revisited the events. At the museum, gratitude in her gaze. "I've been asked by Sir Fenton to collaborate on an academic symposium in 2 weeks," she said. "A platform to discuss the fragment and council minutes." Holmes allowed a rare smile. "A public forum ideal for transparency. But we must ensure it cannot be subverted." Al-Malik cleared his throat, his voice colored with humility. "London's academic corridors are still wary. They speak of Percival's fragment as mythical. Some doubt its significance." Holmes leaned back. "Which makes our next step unavoidable. Momentum must carry forward. Silence now could undo all we've achieved." A knock at the door announced Mycroft Holmes's arrival. He entered briskly, efficient and precise as ever. "Thomas Jones," he said, passing a handwritten note to Holmes, a quiet correspondent. "He reports that several libraries in the city received anonymous packages, yesterday, fragments of ritual correspondence bearing the snake book emblem." Holmes frowned. "An attempt to rebuild secrecy, or intimidate." Mycroft continued, "They appear timed to disrupt your symposium. I suggest you prepare for possible interference." Lucille's face paled. "They aim to sow doubt." Holmes nodded. "Then we must be resolute in answer." Throughout the day, the group divided tasks. Lucille and Sir Fenton worked on symposium logistics. Holmes instructed Scotland Yard to secure the venue. Al-Malik and Watson drafted a presentation on Percival's fragment's significance. Corwin and Isabella Kendrick investigated the provenance of the mailed packages. Holmes moved among us with quiet purpose, his mind clearly juggling the many threads. As evening fell, he stopped at the door of his locked study inside. Both daggers and the fragment remained secure beneath his personal care. Proof in hand still, we must honor the work it demands, he whispered to himself, pushing the door closed. Later, as page and candlelight failed, a discreet knock on the front window startled us. Holmes answered. A young woman, drenched from sudden rain, held a sealed envelope. Without introductions, she slipped it through. Holmes closed the window and motioned her away. He opened the envelope quickly. "You protected truth at its shrine, but knowledge bears price. Dare you go public with what follows?" No signature, just a plain sheet. Holmes folded it. "Their threats have turned from covert to overt. They dare us to act." He looked to Watson. Time for careful retribution. The next afternoon, Lucy Fenton arrived with invitations to the symposium mailed to scholars across England. As requested, Mr. Holmes, she said, placing the stack before him. Topics, ritual secrecy and public knowledge. Holmes nodded. Exactly what we need. He turned to Lucille. Your role in the discussion is central. We must speak truth in public. Lucille looked uneasy but resolute. Holmes offered reassurance. We are with you. On the morning of the event, posters and columns announced the symposium. Memory and Mystery, Percival Willoughby and the Tatar. Broken Covenant. Under bright London sky, participants streamed into the grand lecture hall. Holmes moved quietly among them, greeting Sir Fenton and the museum director. A low buzz of anticipation filled the air. Watson, Al-Malik, Lucille, Corwin, Kendrick, they took their seats, while Holmes paused at the lectern. He turned, exhaled gently, then nodded to the gallery's green-eyed lens that captured the gathering. Holmes began clearly. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather to celebrate memory's resilience over secrecy's tyranny. Last week we revealed Percival Willoughby's fragment and the council's minutes. Tonight we continue that process. He continued with precision. The fragment's origins, the Covenant's recorded meetings, the rituals once held in closed doors, and the transformation that occurred when memory spoke publicly. Lucille presented an analysis of the fragment's script. Al-Malik explained its scholarly importance. Kendrick added the council minutes. These aren't accusations. They are cautionary testimony, she said. The room was still. Then applause followed, respectful, tempered. Holmes observed, voice soft. Let us commit to memory and to transparency. Suddenly a door behind Holmes swung open. A man in academic robes rushed forward, voice stammering. Professor, he cried to Al-Malik, you misinterpret the wording. This fragment is contextually incomplete. Holmes steadied. Let him speak. The man faltered. You've taken Willoughby's words out of context. A hush fell. Holmes responded, unwavering. Then let the public see the full transcription. We shall publish the annotated text with critical commentary. Lucille stepped forward. No fragment escapes revision, but no fragment should be buried. The man sputtered, taking a seat. Holmes concluded, our quarrel is not with academic debate, it is with enforced silence. Let all talk, let all learn. Afterwards, Holmes and his team dined in the green room. Scholars came forward to affirm the work. The rogue academic from earlier approached, voice apologetic. He praised their openness. Lucille smiled at Holmes. They turned out for memory after all. Holmes merely tipped his head and smiled faintly. At 221B. That night, Lucille and Kendrick left, lingering with quiet farewells. Al-Malik prepared to return to Paris for further study. Holmes and Watson sat by the fire. Memory remains, Holmes murmured. I should say so, I replied, lighting my pipe. He tapped his cane. But the covenant endures not in ritual, but in shadow. We must remain vigilant. Chapter 10. Shadows of Retribution. A brittle calm settled over Baker Street as dawn broke, light filtering through frost-laced windows and dancing upon the daggers atop Holmes's desk. Percival's fragment and Isabella Kendrick's council minutes lay side by side beneath polished glass, a symbol of memory laid bare. Holmes lounged in his chair, fingers tracing the edge of the fragment's display box, his eyes distant. Believe our achievement at the museum caused more ripples than we foresaw, he remarked, voice quiet but steely. The Covenant responds not with silence, but with shadows. They threaten now, Watson, and we must respond. By mid-morning, the household was unsettled by deliveries. 2 letters lay on the doormat. Letter 1, sent from a London address bearing Marceau's new emblem. It warned, your disclosures jeopardize order. Withdraw your symposium or endure isolation. Letter 2, an anonymous message typewritten on crisp white paper. The daggers may protect, but their twin remembers. Percival will rue this day. Lucille Ravenel entered, clutching the letters. They aim to frighten us, she said. Al-Malik drew in a shuddering breath. They want us to cease and bury memory yet again. Holmes folded the typewritten note, scanning its minimal lines with disapproval. They test our resolve. We will not yield. To Lestrade's inspector he instructed, find the font, the typewriter, and the sender's trail. That afternoon the entire group convened. Holmes, Watson, Lucille, Al-Malik, Corwin, Kendrick, and Inspector Thornton from Scotland Yard, each bearing the fresh tension. Holmes stood before the fireplace, stroking his chin. We must anticipate their next move. The Covenant, not ignorant of ritual or symbolism, may seek retribution in deed, not word. He paused, eyes sweeping the circle. Tonight we go to the heart of it all, the chapel crypt under Wexley's old shrine. If they wish spectacle, we shall attend, but on our terms. Lucille looked away, voice soft. You mean confrontation? Holmes nodded gravely. Yes, but confrontation without chaos. Calm, but undeniable. By dusk, the assembled prepared. With tense deliberation, Holmes and Watson, lanterns, rope, signal flares, historical records of the chapel and crypt layout, Lucille and Kendrick, leather-bound cases containing minutes, public statements, and duplicate fragments. Al-Malik and Corwin, camera equipment, legal documentation, and first aid kits. Inspector Thornton and colleague, handcuffs, masks, and warrants for incitement or conspiracy. Holmes halted their departure to inspect each lantern. Light our path spectacle cannot overpower truth. When Trent Street's gaslights flickered to life, they set off under thickening fog. The old chapel stood forlorn among ivy and weathered stone, its wooden door boarded but sturdy. Holmes approached the hatch at the rear, studying its seizure. This lock, he murmured, is too new. He lifted his toolkit and swiftly returned to lifting the boards, revealing the hatch's iron ring and drop plank beneath. With ceremonial grace he opened it. A rush of cold, earth-scented air greeted them as they climbed down into darkness. Crypt corridors sloped into silence, broken only by measured footsteps and occasional water drips from porous stone. Lanterns cast wavering rings of light upon ancient French carvings, snakes entwining books, worn faces of saints. A damp chill crept beneath necklines. They reached a barred door emblazoned with the Covenant's serpent book crest. From within, chanting seeped through boards. Holmes signaled to stop. We wait. Through the wood came hushed voices. It is memory we bind tonight. Our brother has faltered in lineage. Holmes whispered, stay calm. Moments later the hinged side of the door eased open. Masked figures drifted out, carrying a ring of candles and an altar draped in black cloth. At the head stood the tallest among them, mask half lit by lantern light. It was Theodore Marceau. Marceau paused at sighting, his voice resonant but Measured, struck a grave note. Holmes. He raised his chin. You tread where you are not invited. Holmes stepped forward. We come to witness, not intrude. These halls are no longer private. Knowledge cannot be shrouded forever. Marceau's gaze dropped to Kendrick, who positioned the minutes and public declaration atop the altar. Proof, she said, for the world. Marceau's shoulders sagged, anger and pride warring in his stance. Inspector Thornton's voice broke through the shadows. We have warrants for incitement and conspiracy. Marceau's mask fell. His eyes glinted with defiance. You call knowledge dangerous? Holmes advanced, voice calm. Knowledge is preserved by light. Ritual death under shadows is not tradition, it is control. Lucille added softly, Take your time, Theodore. Your legacy is at stake, Marceau inhaled sharply. You have brought witnesses, but will the world truly remember? Holmes smiled faintly. It will not forget authenticity. Marceau's eyes flicked to Kendrick, then to Al-Malik. He stepped back. Thornton moved in, presenting handcuffs. By order of law. Marceau halted. For a long moment, the crypt was still candlelight flickering against carved stone. At last, he nodded. Enough. Outside, the group emerged into night's cool embrace. Marceau, escorted by Thornton, spoke softly to Holmes. I was defender of memory, but not all memory demands secrecy. Holmes inclined. Memory demands honesty. Marceau clasped Kendrick's hand. I name no successors. The covenant ends with me. He vanished down the path. By early morning, Baker Street received them in its quiet glow. Holmes ushered everyone into the sitting room. Lights rekindled. Warm tea poured. Lucille rested her head on Watson's shoulder. Al-Malik examined his camera. Tearful but resolute, Holmes replaced the ledger with foresight. Lestrade's inspector entered quietly. The warrants were processed for distribution of sedition, but no arrests in public. No scandal. Holmes nodded. Justice tempered. With discretion. Later, Watson found Holmes seated before the morning lamp, pipe alight. Maps and minutes cleared aside. I anticipated triumph, but this felt like unmasking a friend, Holmes said softly. Watson sat opposite. You said memory is worth the pain. Holmes exhaled silver smoke. Yes, but one must remain vigilant. The covenant is dismantled, but memory's guardianship never ends. He swept his gaze across the room. The fragment and minutes will enter public archives. Transparency sealed. Holmes tapped the table in finality. Tomorrow, Lucille, and Kendrick present at the symposium, our next step toward a cultural memory. We have reshaped the covenant, but the world may yet forget. He rose slowly. For now, rest. We have won tonight, but memory endures only with care. Watson stood and offered his arm. Together? Holmes grasped it. Together, always. Chapter 11. The last reliquary. London's twilight cast a noble hush over the north wing of the British Museum. Within its vaulted galleries, the marble pillars stood sentinel as Madame Lucille Ravenel and Isabella Kendrick prepared their words for an assembly of revered scholars, government officials, and curious patrons. Holmes and Watson watched from the periphery, their attention drawn to the meticulous care with which Lucille adjusted Isabella's notes, and Isabella smoothed the edges of her leather-bound folder. Their partnership, forged in urgency, now brimmed with quiet confidence and nerves. I observed Holmes's gaze, ever precise. He murmured, "This evening must bridge public trust and institutional responsibility. They are the twin guardians of memory now." As more guests entered under glowing gas lamps, Lucille paused, capturing my attention. "There," she whispered, pointing discreetly to a tall man draped in dark wool, face obscured by scarf and hat. His posture was deliberate, his eyes shadowed. He quietly backed into a reserved row, eyes flicking between Lucille and the fragment's display case. Holmes narrowed his eyes. A silent witness or a watchful adversary. He tapped his cane twice on the marble floor, thinking. Isabella leaned over and touched Lucille's arm. "Focus, dear. We need no distractions." At exactly 8 p.m., Sir Adrian Fenton, the museum's venerable director, stepped forward beneath the domed ceiling. The hush cracked open like an unsealed book. Distinguished guests, our symposium, Memory and Remembrance, from fragment to public archive, marks a testament to transparency and guardianship. What we offer tonight is not merely scholarship, but civic responsibility. He gestured toward Lucille and Isabella, the two mainsprings of tonight's discussion. Holmes observed his cadence, noting a slight relinquishment of caution. No longer rigid but hopeful, Lucille moved to the podium, her voice calm and commanding. Percival Willoughby's fragment was born of deep scholarship, yet threatened by secrecy. We retrieved it from the crypts, not to possess it, but to place it among the people who preserve history. She paused, eyes shining before the audience. The journey from underground chamber to civic display was not merely transfer of ink and parchment. It was a claim that knowledge must not sleep in shadow. The audience stirred, some nodding, others scribbling eagerly. Holmes leaned in, whispering to me, "She speaks with purpose, not rhetoric." Isabella followed, stepping forward with quiet authority. Council minutes lay before us not as accusation, but as evidence that all traditions deserve scrutiny. Knowledge protected behind locked doors invites decay through concealment. Her gaze swung to the man in the back row, whose posture shifted slightly. Had he been recognized? She continued, "We are custodians held accountable to history and future generations. Tonight confirms that responsibility." A murmur rippled through the hall as the dark stranger stood. "I, Dr. Edmund Fairfield, am a Fellow of Archival Sciences. I was present in Dover the night Marceau was unmasked." He removed his scarf, revealing keen features and careful composure. The audience hushed. "Tonight, more than fragment or minutes, we come to build infrastructure, oversight, archival redundancy, and public commitment." Holmes gave a slight nod. He had been right about the man a guardian in doubt turned ally. An elderly professor rose, cane in hand. "There are concerns that politicizing the fragment will doom it to partisan use. How do you ensure its scholarly integrity?" Lucille answered first. "Through peer review, collaborative research, and public access specifically. We invite all sides to engage under documented conditions." Kendrick added, "Guardianship must not breed partisanship. The fragment, a single shard of memory, becomes collective history through openness." Holmes stepped forward with elegant poise. "Memory is never static. It is written in fragments and rewritten through humility. Our charge is to preserve its integrity and allow it to speak, not to brandish history as weapon." He paused, eyes gliding over assembled figures. Tonight affirms memory's future, transparent, accountable, and accessible. Applause filled the hall, crisp and measured dot after the session. In a side gallery illuminated by soft lanterns, Fairfield approached. "Holmes and Lucille, my thanks." He said to Lucille, "You speak what we felt, but could not yet organize." He looked at Holmes. "But there remain threats those who value secrecy over scholarship. We begin the council, but unguarded." Holmes studied him. "We proceed. Cautiously, our oversight is public, our alliances determined. Will you accept formal inclusion?" Fairfield drew a card from his pocket. "It's ready provisional charter for Oversight Council. I'd propose an initial quorum, museum, government, legal, Scotland Yard, and our scholarly voices." Lucille slipped forward. "Thank you. This is the structure memory deserves." By candlelight in Baker Street, the group gathered in Holmes's sitting room. Lucille, Isabella, Fairfield, Al-Malik, Watson, and Holmes. A low fire flickered against polished daggers under glass. Fairfield spread the draft charter, public archive of fragment and minutes, annual independent review, fellowship, program for researchers. Digital and print redundancy across Europe. Legal, protection against ritual suppression, transparency clause, any future ritual checked by warrant. Al-Malik adjusted his spectacles. "This ensures history remains fluid, not fossilized by power." Isabella added, "and keeps the covenant as a shared responsibility." Holmes nodded his approval. "This is memory's last reliquary, not chest of secrets, but beacon of light." As the hour grew late, Lucille stood and addressed them gently. "We have fortified memory tonight, but vigilance is our next chapter." Holmes rose, cane scraping softly. "Agreed. The covenant may fall asleep, but shadows linger. Ours is not celebration, but resolve." Watson placed his hand on Holmes's arm. "We have built something that endures." Holmes permitted himself a faint smile. "Indeed. But keep your lamps lit. History does not rest." Later, Holmes lingered before the fragment and daggers. The candle's flame revealed the silver tone of Percival's blade. He whispered softly, "Your memory now lives in ink and archive, but vigilance. Endures. Tomorrow we prepare for the covenant's waning ghosts." He left the room, candle glowing, until the door closed. Chapter 12. The Vault of Forgotten Oaths. A steady rain tapped against the fogged windows of 221B, casting ephemeral patterns of light and shadow across the room. Holmes leaned over his desk, tracing the outline of a map of London with his cane. The fragment and minutes lay before him, carefully catalogued. Beside them, the Oversight Charter, drafted by Dr. Edmund Fairfield. The soft glow of the lamp warmed a stillness broken only by Holmes's quiet hum of contemplation. "Memory is safe tonight," he said softly, "but the covenant still breathes, its ghosts stirring in the wake of our revelations." I joined him, pen in hand, eager to record this penultimate moment. "What comes next, Holmes?" He pressed his fingers to his temple. "We must turn our vigilance outward. We protected the fragment, but we do not yet know who may seek its suppression anew. We must trace the covenant's lingering tendrils and dismantle its last hidden nodes." No sooner had darkness settled than a discreet knock interrupted our reflections. Mr. Inspector Thornton entered, bearing a thin, sealed envelope. Holmes took it with deliberate calm. Breaking the wax with a practiced flick. Mr. Holmes, proceed tonight to the Bank of England's old bullion vault, level C3. There lies an artifact of significance to the Covenant. Keep discreetness paramount, no lights. T. Holmes's gaze flashed. The Covenant hid more than manuscripts, perhaps relics. This could be their ultimate anchor. I swallowed. No ceremony tonight, but covert action? Holmes nodded. We depart shortly. Within the hour, Holmes, Watson, Lucille, Isabella, and Dr. Fairfield, now an essential ally, stood, gathered in 221B, each outfitted for a discreet nocturnal expedition. Holmes loaded signal lanterns and a stethoscope, noting damp seals on the envelope. Lucille set her butterfly revolver into her bag. Isabella carried a collapsible darkroom tripod and camera. Fairfield tucked away keys and archival papers. I prepared medical supplies in case any confrontations turned risky. Holmes addressed us all, voice low but resolute. We enter a vault of secrets, not as thieves, but as seekers of truth. If the Covenant left relics here, they made them part of the ritual economy. We break their power by exposure. Outside, the rain had intensified, making the journey to Threadneedle Street stealthier and colder. Inside the vault's service corridor, we passed guards and grim-faced clerks, accustomed to nocturnal transfers. Holmes produced the envelope, which Thornton recognized and accepted with discretion. We descended to level C3, a forgotten row of locks and reinforced walls. Lights dimmed beyond us. We entered by the service key. Lanterns extinguished. Our footsteps echoed in chilly darkness, each step magnifying the weight of the unseen. At the far end, Holmes located Vault C311. The seal bore the serpent and book embossed a cruel remnant of the Covenant's reach even into finance. He ran a test latch across the edges. The lock yielded under his gloved precision. Inside lay a narrow metal case, antique and sturdy, its hinge worn but intact. No inscription marked the exterior. Holmes opened it gently. Inside rested a silver reliquary ornate with serpent entwined around a miniature book, a crimson ribbon interwoven with gold thread, a folded vellum scroll, sealed with wax like Percival's butt, bearing no signature. Holmes lifted the reliquary first. It was heavy with craftsmanship. I whispered, "What is it?" Holmes said quietly, "A ritual vessel, probably meant to hold blood oaths or even ashes of initiates." Isabella placed her tripod for low-light photography, while Lucille prepared to safeguard the pieces. Holmes held the scroll up to the lantern's weak flicker. He broke the seal with care, producing a single startling sentence inside-scrolled. "Gothic, here lies our Covenant, bound in debt and dark until memory dismantles us or reignites our cause." Below, a fragment of text erased, rubbed out, spoke of debts, tribute, and secrecy. Holmes's eyes reflected lamplight. "This lies between religion and finance. The Covenant manipulated both." Outside the vault door, Lucille whispered, "A reliquary bound in finance. They invested fear as currency. We expose this, and their web unravels further." Fairfield nodded. "We need contextual research trace how it came to the bank." Isabella added, "Digital records may show when it was deaccessioned from museum or acquired during charity estate seizures." Holmes responded, "We document. We pull forward everything, acquisition, custody, purpose." As Holmes carefully resealed the case, Lucille hesitated. But even with this, one node will remain who originally pledged. Holmes's gaze glinted. That Miss Ravenel we must still locate. He rose. In the morning we return these items to the case for official custody, but our copies go to museum archives, newspapers, and legal committees. We retraced our way out, boots slipping on stone, gloves damp, hearts racing. Watson, unprepared for the weight of this night, expressed concern. Holmes, isn't this evidence too heavy to contain in private hands? Holmes paused beside the lantern glow. That is why tomorrow transparency must continue. Not just words and words, but facts and relics exposed. By midnight, cushions warmed, and kettle brewing. We sat once more in 221 B. Holmes set the relic case and scroll before us on a small table. He stood back. This reliquary, it is the Covenant's soul. We cannot leave it underground or behind closed doors again. He lit his pipe. The battle of memory now extends to physical artifacts. We need global notice. Holmes unfolded a printed copy of the National Trust's statutes and the bank's charter. We publish or we perish, he said. Tomorrow's news must speak of physical relics recovered, no longer hidden. But custody? Asked Fairfield. Holmes smiled faintly. Public exhibition at the museum? Press release in morning papers. Parliamentary question imminent. Lucille nodded. Memory cannot be contained and should no longer be feared. A rolling thunder echoed outside, as if London itself acknowledged the turning of events. Holmes looked to the reliquary-locked case. Tonight we found one node. Others may yet lie hidden in churches, parliament vaults, banks, libraries, museums. Each we must trace. He leaned forward, voice low and fervent. We are not only protecting memory now, but tracing its dark currency. I wrote the last line in my notebook, noting the steel behind his certainty. As the hour passed, companions departed quietly. Isabella and Fairfield for archival leads. Lucille to be on standby for crucial interviews. Watson for needed rest. Holmes remained, candle-guttering, softly humming a dusty tune. He traced the reliquary's shadow on the wall. Memory must be innocent, but vigilance is its constant guard. He finally extinguished the lamp, darkness congealing around his silhouette. Chapter 13. The thorn beneath the velvet, the carriage wheels clattered down Fleet Street as the early morning sun broke through the persistent mist of London. Beside me, Holmes sat rigidly upright, his fingertips pressed together and resting against his lips. He had spoken little since we left Hamley House, but the flicker in his eyes betrayed a mind in motion. I trust, he finally said, that you have considered the significance of the misplaced dagger. I confess, I replied, that I remain uncertain as to what it signifies. The fact that it was found near Miss Lydia's bed and bore no fingerprints, well, that seems incriminating, but not decisive. Quite so. But consider the oddity. Watson, if one were to commit a murder with a distinctive antique dagger, would one leave it in so conspicuous a place? The absence of fingerprints suggests gloves were worn, but by whom, and for what reason?